Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Honorable Director of Center for Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instruments, Honorable invited speakers, Chairman, representatives of international organizations, ministries and agencies, non-government organizations, universities and private companies, distinguished guests and participants. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, very good morning, and welcome to the International Conference on Engaging Social Economic of Environment and Forestry, Better Social Welfare. This conference is organized by the Center for Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instruments as part of the 6th INAFOR 2021. It is my pleasure to be your master of ceremony for this occasion. I am Dewi Ratna Kurniasari. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, this conference is divided into two sessions. First is plenary session that contains presentations of keynote speakers. And second is parallel session that is divided into three sub-themes. First, community empowerment. Second, social and institutional construction. Third, forest economic. The agenda of today's conference will be opening remarks, photo session, plenary session, parallel session, and closing session. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start today's event, let us all be straight seated to the national anthem of Indonesia. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we continue to the next agenda, let us all pray to God Almighty, according to our respective religions and beliefs. Let's begin our prayer. Amen. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, first agenda is opening remarks from the Director of Center for Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instruments. Please help me welcome Ibu Dr. Eti Ginoga. Please, Madam, the platform is yours.
Honorable Dr. Ida Bagus Putra Pratama, Honorable keynote speech, Dr. Adam Tyson, Dr. Tetra Yanuaryadi, Dr. Daniel Mendam, Dr. Ami Dussel, Professor Subarudi, distinguished presenters, college, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning from Bogor. Peace be upon us. It gives me a great pleasure to welcome to the second day of the 6th International Conference of Indonesian Forestry Researchers, or we call INAFOR. As we all know, yesterday the INAFOR of 2020 was officially opened by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, Ibu Dr. Siti Nurbaya, and today is the second day. Unlike previous years, this year the event is held virtually due to COVID-19 pandemic, which forbid us to meet face-to-face. However, I'm very grateful that we live in this modern era where the means of communication are sophisticated, and here we are meeting through Zoom. The 6th INAFOR 2021 was initiated by Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and it carries an important term, greener future for the environment, disaster resilience, and climate change, which is the key to greener future. The theme is even more important for our center point of view, where we call our center is the Center of Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change. There are 5 topics of the today conference, one of which is the one that we are attending now, which with the term is engaging social economic of environment and forestry, better social welfare. Distinguished college, ladies and gentlemen, we all know that science, knowledge, and technology are critical to the sustainable management of environment and forests. Improvement in science and technology are crucial to fulfill growing demand for the range of goods and services that forest and environment can provide, including social benefit. Innovation and technologies are needed to address multiple use of forest management, to assure the balance of ecosystem, process, and social economic benefit. The information resulted from science is needed for our ministry to formulate implementation of a policy, including developing a basis for standardization and instrument to enhance environment and forestry stewardship. Distinguished college, ladies and gentlemen, standing as a mega biodiversity country, invention and innovation of sustainable forest management are extremely a must, because it can balance and optimize the benefit of forests for community welfare, biodiversity conservation, and achieving 2030 Sustainable Development Target. This is to ensure that forests and the biodiversity are managed, protected, and utilized sustainably to increase the economic and social welfare of all elements of the community, and to enhance the resilience of human life in the level, ground level, national level, and also global level. The strategy is aligned with National Development 2020-2024 and indicative a pathway toward a long-term vision of 2045, and also the long-term strategy on low carbon and climate resilience development 2050. Distinguished college, ladies and gentlemen, today output are science, technology, and innovation are delivered for a basic formulation of policy, and also the basic formulation of standard and instrument in our ministry. That's the first output of today's conference. The second output is the networking and collaboration of our institution and our scientists is enhanced. And the third is new ideas for the advancement of forests and environmental management in Indonesia and supporting global commitment are shared and formulated. So at least we have 3 outputs that we are targeting from today's conference. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in this conference, we have invited one prominent moderator, Dr. Ida Bagus Putra Partama, and 5 well-known keynote speakers and experts in their field at the plenary session at the beginning of the today conference. Namely Dr. Adam Tyson from UK, Dr. Tetra Yanuaryadi from ITTO, Dr. Daniel Mendam from CSIRO and ASIAR, Dr. Ami Dussel from FAO, and Professor Subarudi from the Center of Standardization and Instrument. I would like to ask the keynote speaker to speak slowly so we can understand, fully understand, and raise the question after. So the question and answer would be very important for us to enhance our knowledge. And for that, the keynote speaker, although I understand that the keynote speakers are located in various parts of the world, in UK, in Japan, in Australia, Italy, and here in Bogor, with varying time lag. Some are in the morning, afternoon, evening, or even early morning. And that I would like to express my deep appreciation and gratitude to all speakers and also our moderator for their willingness to fulfill our invitation and commitment to share their experience at this event. Later this afternoon, we will have 43 scientists and experts with a diverse background that will present their latest work and finding. Their presentation are grouped into 3 sub-themes: community empowerment, social and institutional construction, and forest economic. I thank you for presenters participating in INAFOR, and congratulations on the selection of your paper. Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this event will not be happen without excellent cooperation and hard work of all colleagues in the organizing committee yesterday and today. For that, I thank you and highly appreciate to all of the committee members to make this event happen. And last, let me close my remark and open the second day of the 2020 INAFOR Stream 4 by wishing you a very valuable and successful conference. I sincerely hope that you will enjoy the presentation and networking. I thank you very much. Stay healthy and productive. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Guests, ladies and gentlemen, kindly remind for all participants to fill out the attendance form provided by the organizing committee in the chat room and use the virtual background. Participants are expected to deliver questions through Google Form on the link provided by the committee. Kindly remind there are special gifts for selected participants who deliver questions. Distinguished participants are expected to always pay attention to the rules during the conference. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, next agenda is plenary session. The plenary session will be moderated by Dr. Ida Bagus Putra Partama. Dr. Putra is a forester who earned his PhD from Michigan State University, USA, He spent his entire professional career with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. He retired in 2019 with more than 35 years of serving since 1983. His last position was Director General of Watershed Management and also briefly caretaker of DG of Climate Change. He was DG of Sustainable Management of Production Forest and Senior Advisor to the Minister of Forestry on Economic and Trade. The largest part of his career was spent with Forestry Research and Development Agency. He proud to be the initiators of INAFOR and suggested the name. Dr. Putra was a regular representative of Indonesia in various international, regional, and bilateral fora of forestry. Currently, he is an independent advisor to some companies, as well as involved in a number of non-profit foundations. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite Dr. Ida Bagus Putra Partama to guide the plenary session. Please, Doctor, the platform is yours.
Distinguished INAFOR participants, speakers, and of course also Honorable Director of the Center. Welcome to the stream 4 of the plenary session of INAFOR 6, which is scheduled to take place today, the second day of the 6th INAFOR, from 9 to 12 p.m. AM, Jakarta time. My name is Putra Partama, as introduced earlier, and being a retiree from this office, I'm really proud. It's a great honor for me that I'm asked by my former employer to moderate this plenary session on engaging social, economic, and environment and forestry, better social welfare. The sessions, which will stage 5 prominent speakers, I believe is going to be very interesting and stimulating. The 5 speakers will share their massive wealth of knowledge, research output, thought, and experience related to the social economic of environment and forestry, especially in the context of realizing a better social welfare. We agree, it goes without saying, that the ultimate goal of natural resource management is attaining significant betterment of social welfare. No question about it. It is the common goal we share in the world. So the question is actually on how it must be done. Because the reality is the social welfare of the people, especially those living in villages around forests, is still way below the level we have been aiming for decades. So there must be something need to be changed. Many questions remain to be answered through research. The issue is complicated, of course. First, it is about people's access to forest resource. It also relates to governance. Some say the key is policy and governance. But policies have been created and implemented, but do they work? Still a question. It is becoming more complicated because there are also subject matters that seems persistently hindering the achievement of the goal. Forest fire, for example, the incident of forest fire. It has been greatly affecting social welfare of the people in fire-prone villages in Sumatra and Kalimantan. Forest fires greatly affect the living of the forest villages. On the other hand, there are opportunities that can be reaped. the issue of climate change, for example, and the world's commitment to mitigate climate change, produce several mechanisms, such as RED Plus mechanism, for instance, which may put the forest people on a better bargaining position. But still, something must be done, improve, in order such a mechanism to be positively impacting the social welfare of the people. So today we are going to absorb a spectrum of information on those issues from 5 invited speakers. We have about 2 hours and 30 minutes for the sessions. And this is how we are going to use the time. I will provide each speaker 15 to 20 minutes at the most to present their material in a panel mode. That will take about 100 minutes, or an hour and 40 minutes. So we will still have almost an hour for a discussion after the 5 presentations. All right, I don't want to take too much time, precious time. I'm going to start by inviting our first speaker, is Dr. Daniel Mendam. Dr. Mendam will share with us about reducing fires and smoke haze through peatland restoration, successes and learnings from the Gambut Kita SR project. A brief introduction about Dr. Mendam. He is currently Principal Research Scientist with CSIRO Land and Water, Australia. He got his PhD in 1998 in Plant Nutrition and Soil Fertility at the University of Tasmania. Also, he got his Bachelor of Agriculture Science and with honors at the University of Tasmania. Dr. Mendam has accumulated nearly 30 years experience in agriculture for agroforestry, plantation productivity, and sustainability in tropical and temperate regions. His enormous experience is reflected in the number of papers he published, which is more than 100. I counted it in 114 papers to be specific, how prolific he is. Dr. Mendam was and is principal scientist in many research, the most recent being improving community fire management and peatland restoration in Indonesia. It is an ongoing holistic research involving a team of dozens of scientists. The result of this particular research is expected to contribute to the policy improvement in Indonesia on peat forest management. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite Dr. Mendam. The platform is yours, Dr. Mendam, for about 15 to 20 minutes. Please, Dr. Mendam.
Thank you very much, Pak Butera, for your very kind introduction. Thanks to Kusvianti for the welcome and the organising committee. It's a really fantastic opportunity to present to all of you about our experiences in the Gambut Kita R&D project. And I'd just particularly like to thank all of you who are participating in this session. I'm sure it's going to be very interesting and enlightening. Before I start, I'd like to acknowledge all of my friends and colleagues who are part of the Gambut Kita team. There's about 80 people, but I particularly wish to thank Bu Nick and Sakar Sakuntala Dewi for her in-country leadership and her support. I'm sorry we can't be together in person this year. I'm looking forward to a much better 2022, and hopefully we can start traveling again and meet in person again. But it is great that we've got Zoom, which is able to provide us with this opportunity that otherwise we wouldn't have. So I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully that will work. And today it's my pleasure to talk to you about the things that we're learning in our Gumboot Kita project and how we can really improve peatland restoration and reduce fires, which are a national and international crisis every year. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background into the project, into our Gumboot Kita project, and then I'll lead you through some of the learnings. But Gumboot Kita is a collaborative research and development project, and you can see there's a large number of partners there. What we're aiming to do is to reduce unwanted peatland fires. We want to generate new knowledge to underpin peatland restoration. We want to make sure that both livelihoods and industry can be sustained on restored peatlands. And we want to foster best practice by working through policy analysis and improving what we can to maximize the knowledge that we gain and deploy it to the people who are going to use it. And those implementation agencies are really key to what we're doing. So we need to work very closely with people like MOEF, with people like BRG, who are actually on the ground, and particularly the communities who are on the ground actually restoring peatlands. I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of the structure of the project, just so you understand where I'm coming from, but that's not the basis of my talk. But we have 5 objectives and a range of cross-project activities that are occurring. Objective 1 is understanding the causes and drivers of peatland fires. So why do fires start? What makes them become peat fires? What makes the fire go into the peat and then become the problem that it is? Objective 2 is around identifying inclusive and sustainable livelihood options on re-wet peat. So what can people do to make sure that they continue to have a good livelihood, earn a good living once the peat is re-wet? Objective 3 is around understanding the soil, the peat soil itself, and what happens when you drain it and what happens when you re-wet it. How can we best manage that soil to support people in their livelihoods? Objective 4 is around improving or understanding and improving the policy aspects of peatland restoration. Objective 5 is around supporting all of the stakeholders to manage that knowledge base that everyone has, but is a bit dispersed and widespread. What can we do to improve people's knowledge of peatland restoration? And lastly, we've got a number of core project activities that really aim to make the best use of our interdisciplinary strengths and our connections with stakeholders. And just for context, I'd like to explain that we're working from the national level down to the village level, but we're focusing in 2 villages, Tumbang Nusa in Pulang Pisau Regency and Kayu Labu village in Oki in South Sumatra. And really we're trying to, we've got 2 contrasting locations here, and we want to get a deeper understanding of the peatland system and how those communities are impacted by peatland restoration and what we can do as a community to support them. So there's several key learnings that I'm going to be talking about in this talk. And these are things that I've observed and that I think where we are able to make a difference going forward. So they are: the ban on burning has had an impact on reducing fires, some fires, but it isn't sustainable. I'll go into more detail on the next slide, but re-wetting is is happening, but it's not happening in an effective way. For livelihoods, everyone's looking for a silver bullet, something that'll solve the problems, but actually there are no silver bullets, but we do have some options. Peatland restoration is not on the community radar as a priority. There's lots of priorities, and restoration is just one of them. And in fact, everyone from the top down to the community has a very different vision of how restored peatlands should look. Lastly, oil palm is still the preferred option. And why not? And I'd like to finalise by talking about what pathways we have going forward in terms of restoration. So I'm going to go into a bit more detail now. The ban on burning that has started being more enforced since 2015. It's been there for a long time, but enforcement has really started since 2015, has reduced fires. So Sean Sloan, in his research, has found that the number of hotspots is reduced by about 50% in normal years. But sadly, in dry years, it's only a reduction of about 30%. But that ban on burning has actually created a lot of social inequality. Smaller farmers have fewer options because any options that they do have are fairly capital intensive or very labour intensive. And in 2019, we found that there's actually quite a lot of pent-up demand. So if communities have the opportunity, they will go straight back to burning as quickly as they can. And so we still need to do a lot more to change the social norms around non-burning. And we still need to provide a lot more support for what they can do in terms of non-burning agriculture. That's in terms of providing them with knowledge, as well as materials and equipment. And one of the key things, I think, is going to be a transition to sustainable perennial options that will facilitate that non-burning going forward. I'd like to make the observation that re-wetting is still not occurring in a very effective way. The re-wetting is really a critical part of restoration. Without re-wetting, the fires are going to keep going. They're going to continue, no matter how much non-burning agriculture we provide the communities with. If the peatland is dry, it will still burn. But we can see that the scale of the challenge is enormous. I've got a map here of Tumbang Nusa village and the re-wetting infrastructure that's been put in place. There's something like 250 deep wells along the road. That's shown as points. And then there's half a dozen canal blocks on all of those many canals that are in Tumbang Nusa. But to my mind, those deep wells are really like a band-aid. They're a temporary solution. They can be used to put out fires. They can be used to wet the surface of the peat, but they really require a lot of maintenance and a lot of input. And they may help put out fires, but they will also accelerate peat oxidation, so that the peat will continue to be lost through oxidation. So there's an enormous investment gone into Tumbang Nusa in this re-wetting infrastructure, but a lot of it is actually not helping to do that in an effective way. Canal blocking and canal backfilling is really the only sustainable solution that will allow for full re-wetting with minimal ongoing labour and input, but that's really expensive, and it completely changes how the communities are able to manage their land, because the peat will be re-wet a lot of the time, or be wet a lot of the time. And because of these challenges, peatland restoration is not on the community radar as a priority. It's headline as a national priority, but on the ground the message is very mixed. In Tumbang Nusa, there's a big new push for oil palm plantings on peat. In Sumatra, there's a push for new rice cultivation. And why not? These are economic activities that the communities need. And in the absence of a clear message, that's what they will go for. On the one hand, the communities actually acknowledge that fires and smoke haze are incredibly damaging to their livelihoods and also their health. And they agree that restoration is important, but they still do not understand that restoration is not going to allow them to continue business as usual. It's going to require a step change in the way they do business, the way that they run their livelihoods, and that we still haven't managed to make that clear. And so I've mentioned it before, but oil palm is the preferred option, and why not? Because it provides them with a secure income. It provides them with infrastructure and investment that they need. The only trouble is that oil palm is not sustainable on peatland. It's going to lead to more peatland degradation. But we're in this nasty situation where anything else we can offer, whether it's purun or pineapples, is going to cost the community in terms of that lost opportunity. So it's very challenging for us to make recommendations for them to adopt something that is going to cost them, or is going to cause them to lose their livelihoods that they're used to. So we need to be very strategic in how we package and offer alternative options. There are no silver bullets for improving livelihoods. Agriculture on peat is difficult enough. And once the peat becomes re-wet, if it does, the options are largely long-term, quite speculative, and require a totally different mindset. There's lots of valuable work going on, but adoption by the community is quite low. So in Tumbang Nusa, of the 10 livelihood programs that have been initiated in the last 5 years, only one is still operative. And of the 16 demonstration plots that have been established, only 2 or 3 farmers have actually adopted those techniques. So we're not cutting through, we're not making that difference. And to my mind, researchers actually need to think more like community members and find solutions that don't require that step change in practice. And it may be things like REDD plus, it may be things like more home garden options, and agroforestry is another pathway that potentially allows for cash flow now, but provides an opportunity for full re-wetting in the future once the trees start to bear fruit. Everyone has a different vision of peatlands, restored peatlands. And this is a problem for us because at the higher level, we can have an ideal vision of restored peatlands. So we know that block canals, revegetated peat domes, and revitalised livelihoods is what we all want. But every step in the chain as we go down, get towards the community level, there's a different vision of how that works. And so when we get down to the community, it's a very mixed vision, and they actually don't have a clear idea about peatland restoration at all. So pathways going forward, from my perspective, I think it needs to be driven by the community, and people will only be empowered to do it if their lives and livelihoods are going to be improved. On top of that, they need to be able to do it autonomously. So they need to be able to do it themselves and not be reliant on external parties. They need to be competent, so they need lots of training, they need lots of capacity building in doing what they need to do to earn their livelihoods on restored or re-wet peat. and they need to be surrounded and supported by a group of like-minded peers. And I think, it's clear that they need sustainable livelihood options that give them better returns and better infrastructure and better investment than oil palm does. And all peatland stakeholders from the national down to the community level need to have a shared vision so that the messages on the ground are not mixed. So I'm going to close off now, but I'd like to welcome you to have a look at our Gambut Kita website, and I'd like to encourage you to continue this conversation and help us to restore the peatlands of Indonesia. So thank you very much. I'll hand you back to Pak Putera.
Thank you very much for very interesting presentations, and I believe your sharing has ignited questions and comment later on, because it is the finding is very interesting. Among others, there is no shared vision yet, in the peatland restoration in Indonesia. Yes, we managed to reduce fire so far, but at a significant social cost to the people. So a lot of things need to be done in order for the peat restoration to be successful. Please kindly stay in the platform for the discussion later on. Now I would like to invite our second speaker. He is Dr. Tetra Yanuaryadi. Dr. Tetra Yanuaryadi will speak about opportunities to improve forest governance for sustaining tropical forests. A brief CV of Dr. Yanuaryadi. He graduated from Faculty of Forestry, Mullah Warman University, Kalimantan, Indonesia. And he holds a master's degree in forest science from ITC Twente University, and a PhD degree in agriculture and environmental science from Wageningen University, the Netherlands. Dr. Yanuaryadi is currently the ITTO project manager of trade and industry. The position he holds since 2008. Before working with ITTO, he was previously head of forestry division or forestry attached at the Indonesian embassy in Tokyo. And before that, he was head of evaluation division of the Indonesian Ministry of Forestry. And he also worked for forest program coordinator of the WWF Indonesia. Dr. Yanuaryadi will share important things based on his years of experience in ITTO. He was instrumental in the ITTO programs on enhancing sustainable forest management in the tropics, while also expanding and diversifying the trade in tropical wood product from sustainably managed and legally harvested forests. And without taking much more time, I'm pleased to invite Dr. Tetra Yanuaryadi to present your material in 15 or 20 minutes. Dr. Tetra, the platform is yours, please.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day, salam sehat dan sejahtera bagi kita semuanya. I'm very happy today to have the opportunity to present ITTO's work to sustain tropical forests with regard to opportunities to improve forest governance. This is my second chance to speak on the famous INAFOR, And this time particularly to address the stream 4 on the engaging social economic of environmental and forestry, better social welfare. Today, I'm going to talk about sustainable forest management of tropical forests in the context of forest governance. We believe that practicing good forest governance is a key factor for the sustainability of the tropical forest resources. ITTO is an intergovernmental organization mandated to promote sustainable management and conservation of tropical forests and the expansion and diversification of trade in tropical timber forests from sustainably managed and legally harvested forests. So therefore, I'm focusing my talk today on forest governance, which include challenges, opportunities, approach that we are now progressing. Since its establishment several years back, ITTO has developed tools and guidelines for SFM that ITTO member countries have been referring to in their effort to achieve the objective of sustainable forest management. Now, key requirement of sustainability is compliant with all relevant legal frameworks. ITTO began work on forest governance and legally issue almost 3 decades ago to try and counter the negative impacts of illegal practices in tropical forests on the attainment of the organization objective to promote SFM. Here we talk about forest governance. When we deal with the forest governance, we encounter with some challenges. The underlying challenges is non-compliance with forest laws. These challenges demotivates good actors already implementing sustainable forest management and complying with rules and regulations. Challenges also put a brake on forest investment because, the climate for investment is not conducive. That's why they put brake. Challenges also create market distortion because illegal forest products do not reflect the real value of sustainable and legal timber and other forest products. So during the course of our efforts to attain the objective of SFM, at all times we are encountered with challenges. Continue, what kind of challenges? The challenges diminish government revenue through a lack of taxation and other fees. Hampers efforts to promote sustainability among consumers. And challenges also has negative impact on the environment and the livelihood of forest-dependent communities. While we are struggling with the challenges, there are also opportunities to improve forest governance. In recent years, major markets for tropical timber and timber product have sent strong signal to importers on the need to demonstrate the forest products that are coming from legal or sustainable sources. Numerous policies measures are now being implemented to improve and counter the trade and illegally harvested timber. For example, the Lacy Act in the United States of America, IUTR, European Union Timber Regulation, Australian's Illegal Logging Prohibition Act, and the Japan Clean Wood Act. or require evidence of the legality of imported timber. Another opportunity is that the decision by the National Tropical Timber Council, taken in November 2001, provided resources whereby tropical timber producing countries could obtain assistance from the organization to devise ways of improving forest law enforcement. This decision also encouraged members to submit project proposals to tackle unsustainable or illegal timber harvesting and the illegal trade in tropical timber. Indonesia is actually one of ITTO member countries benefit from their council decision. Several ITTO projects implemented in Indonesia dealt with improving forest governance. And at least from my point of view, this project has given positive impacts on declining trend of illegal activities in forest sector in Indonesia. I noted that Indonesia has succeeded in reducing deforestation by 75% during the period of 2019 to 2020. In our approach to forest governance, to improve the forest governance, there are 4 components, namely rationalize policy and legal environment, increase capacity to enforce rules and regulation, improve information and knowledge base, and promote stakeholder participation. Rationalizing policy and legal environment, case studies on forest law enforcement, illegal trade in many countries found conflicting laws and or incoherent policies. Projects in several countries have assisted in identifying underlying causes of illegality and drafting coherent, consistent, enforceable forest legislation. Our country mission to selected countries also identified problems that led to promoted improved policy for forest law enforcement. Program to improve implementation of CITES requirement for listed tropical timber species, ensure that forest law consistent with CITES rules and regulations. On the building capacity, forest law enforcement practices workshop, we jointly organize with other international organizations. We also provide large training program to improve forest statistics, promote use of criteria and indicator and auditing framework. We also promoting phased approach to certification and also promoting the involvement of NGO or civil society in our forest monitoring activities. We also encourage countries to engage with international initiatives such as FLECTI, and in bilateral discussion or agreement, ITTO share experiences. In improving data and knowledge, our biweekly market information system provide price and trade information. Also, our annual review provide detailed information on trade flow. Our trade discrepancy studies and production capacities are really very useful to see how countries can work on how to solve discrepancies between reported export data and reported imported data on forests, on timber and timber products. And our independent market monitoring projects carry out to monitor FLECTI licensed timber entering EU. We also give funded to several countries on doing log tracking project. Our several projects using satellite imagery can really spot illegal forest clearing and also tracking legal or illegal timber. On promoting stakeholder involvement, ITTO provides civil society private sector partnership ground to contribute to SFM and verifiable legality in many countries. And some of the activities led to effort to certify concession. We've really put the private sector as an important stakeholder, and we recognize that the private sector has been taking steps to ensure that they include unsustainable and illegal wood from their supply chains. And we recognize that many countries are increasing their understanding and managing the environmental and social impact embedded in their operation, their supply chain, and their investment. ITTO is a flagship program. We call it Legal Sustainable Supply Chains. On the basis of the concept of sustainable tropical timber supply chains, that the LSSC capture many of the elements of sustainability that ITTO has been promoting since its inception. At its most fundamental, it requires that timber is harvested and traded legally, improve capacity of community and small and medium enterprises to implement and demonstrate that timber produce and credits come from legal and sustainable sources. Sustainable tropical timber supply chains bring benefits to all stakeholders, from forest owner in the tropic to consumer of final products, as well as to the global environment. For those who want to learn more about our LSSC, you can join our online course. Of course, this is a free online course. This is certified course, meaning that at the end of the course, you completed the task, then you will get certificates. You can access this through lssccourse.com. Please do join. So in conclusion, forest governance involves multi-stakeholders to negotiate, make and enforce binding decisions about the management, use and conservation of forest resources. It may include rules about how forests should be governed, include governmental regulation about who benefit from forest resources, and include traditional and customary right issues. So forest governance is in fact fast track to sustain tropical forests. And sustainable tropical forests mean better social welfare. I thank you so much for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tetra Yonariadi, for your interesting presentations. I think being member of ITTO, Indonesia being member of the ITTO, I believe many of the participants are quite, in with what you just present, raising the issue that legality is the key to sustainability, and there are 4 keys to improving governance. I believe there will be many questions raised later on, and please stay tuned, Dr. Tetra. And please allow me a little bit go back to the presentation of Dr. Mendam in order to a little bit help the participant to prepare for their questions. That's I missed to mention this earlier, that the key point Dr. Mendam presented was that the no burning policy still needs some changes because it creates social inequality in the field. And the other thing is that peatland restoration is not yet in the people's priority. It's not in the people radar. This is very important because it implies a lot in the program of peat restoration in Indonesia. And he suggests that it is important what we are doing must be community driven. And in this case, the oil palm issue come into the equation. So I believe participants will have some question or clarification on the issue raised by Dr. Mendak. Again, thank you, Dr. Tetra. Now, please allow me to proceed to invite our third speaker today. He is the research professor Subarudi, who will present his thought entitled Community Livelihood Improvement through Social Forestry and Agraria Reform in Indonesia, a critical thought. So basically, Dr. Subarudi will critically assess the policy that has been implemented in Indonesia to improve people access to forest through social forestry and agraria reform. He will provide the answer to the question whether that policies work and will bring us closer to the goal of sustainable forest management and betterment of the social welfare of the people. Professor Subarudi is a senior researcher at the Center for Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instruments. This is a newly formed institution, a transformation from the Center of Social Economy and Policy and Climate Change. I think, Professor Subarudi got his, I lost for Subarudi. I think he got his bachelor at the IPB University and got his master degree in wood science from university in Australia, I believe. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Subarudi, and got his give me a moment, okay? Sorry, I'm a bit disorganized here finding. Dr. Subarudi is a friend of mine, but because we are friends, we don't really care where he graduated from. Okay, let me read a little bit. He graduated from Faculty of Forestry in IPB University and got a diploma on mechanical wood technology and production management in Kotka Forestry College in Finland, a master's degree in wood science from the University of Melbourne, Australia, I was correct, and a doctorate program on forest management science at postgraduate school of IPB. He is a research professor, and he has served almost 25 years. He collected 25 years experience in forest management field, became a consultant for illegal logging issues in Indonesia, carbon sequestration at SCR project, wood industry development and evaluation of forest and land use change for carbon sequestration and poverty alleviation. He was a leader for foreign projects such as forestry project, Part C, and so on, a number of foreign funded projects, including The last one is a UNESCO project on enhancing livelihood and increasing community resilience to climate change through community learning centers, improve awareness and communication in the ex-PLG area. At present, he is a research professor, as I said, of forest sociology and coordinating integrated research and development plan on strengthening of forest governance. And he published 181 written papers, 26 papers in English, both written individually and with a group. So there's a little shortened version of Dr. Subardi CV. And without taking too much time, please present your material, Professor Subardi, for the team. Please, the platform is yours, please.
Thank you, Dr. Putra, my best friend. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat pagi, salam sejahtera. Good morning. The community of INAFOR that I really appreciate, Honorable Acting Director, Center for the Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instrument, Dr. Krispianti Ginoga, and the Chairman of the meeting, Dr. Putra Partama, and guest keynote speaker, Dr. Tetra, Dr. Ami, Dr. Daniel, and Dr. Anna. First of all, we have to thank to God for His permission. We are all here in a good health condition to participate in INAFOR event. In this occasion, in the beautiful day, allow me to present the keynote speaker with the title, Community Livelihood Improvement through Social Forestry and Agrarian Reform in Indonesia, a critical thought. And we see that President Jokowi in the routine state speech wear the Badu uniform seems to remind us that please to speed up the customary law approval. He also emphasized the requirement for the foundation of the Ed Fund, Indonesian Ed Fund. One of the problem of the Ed Fund is tenure conflict to be solved. In the last 5 years, the tenure conflict decreases, but the competitive area is fluctuated between 0.48 to 1.2 million hectares, and also import is around 90 to 800,000 households. The tenure conflict in forestry can be divided in the vertical and horizontal conflict. The best solution of this is agrarian reform. We call it Land Object Agrarian Reform or TORA, and the social forestry program. I will discuss point of definition of TORA and social forestry and its target, and how to accelerate the target, how it impact to the prosperity of community, and recommendation for effective future implementation. Distinguished participation, ladies and gentlemen. There are the difference between the past and new definition of social forestry lies on the SFM and also trade-off between environmental and cultural dynamic, and also pipe management form. TORA is the rearrange the structure of land domination to more fairness through access and asset arrangement. This is the implementation periods for the community. Forest since the World Forest Congress in 1976 until the launching of the SFM FORA. In the Reformation era, Forest for People program affect the highest recovery rates. There is connection between President era with the agrarian reform implementation. For example, in Suharto era, the TORA was declined by self-sufficient food program. It means the land is not a problem. Summary can be seen in the table. Social forestry management right give access to the division for community, and TORA is ownership right Its recipient is the landless, Gurung farmer, and poor community. The target SF is 12.7 million. Up to June, it's realized 37% with 7,000 license and import 1.0 million households. The TORA is 9 million, consisting of 4.5 for asset legalization already achieved, and 4.1 million hectare for land distribution is only achieved 25%. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, therefore the low target achievement SF and TORA require an acceleration. 5 actions to effort to be done, such as revision of the asset area target, verification, and the other government strategic action. Up to the 2014, there is still imbalance between allocation for forest. Corporate is dominated from the community, is far away. Yeah. This figure should be changed proportionally to asset target. And the target of SF and TORA is 27.1 million, is far ambitious. This is equal to large forest and higher than child forest. And the target should be changed for the next phase, the second phase, to be 1 million, because the achievement of 2020 is only 400,000. This is the realistic target for pandemic. Verification of the target, very important for the right recipient. For example, people living in surrounding forest area is verified by his personal identification number. Revision of PF also should be done because some want to prevent conflict. For example, the wrong license location because far away from the community inhabitant. And the revision should be improved forest management unit and done with participatory approach. For the best allocation of social policy claim, it used two parameters: social capital and local government capability. For example, if the social capital and capacity of local government low, the best scheme social policy is the policy partnership, company and community. The 5 government strategy has already done by government, for example, taking license from province, establishment of working group, and development of social policy online application. The acceleration for TORA can be done by solving its implemented problems, such as rejecting from the HGU holder dominant power for giant company, for example, mining, estate crop, and forestry. This should be solved. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, concept of macro social policy put the community development is second cycle. The first course is cycle is strengthening of the forest function. This will support SFN and environmental friendly. The prosperity improvement can be evaluated to micro and macro level. Micro level has already done, but this need additional verifier and incentive for the gold and silver and so on. The macro level of before and after SF need data. For example, unemployment, poor community, small scale, and policy business. This is the indicator for the success of SF and TORA implementation. But it is the in the national level should be going down to the district level to catch up the success of TORA. And another macro indicator is standard conflict. Although the conflict cases decreases 11 cases, it might be by implementation of OPS, but the conflict on 2020 is double than the conflict 2018. The complete 2020 anomaly when the presence of pandemic and economic growth, the business group expand the business with grasping community. This way, this can be solved by revising of file with the improvement of the forest management unit. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. The movement of FF and TORA should be triggered by forest function. It means it's useless when the economy improves, but will get natural disaster. So it means the environmental ecological should be sensible. And actually, private business have 3 pillars. It's important, but for communities should be clearly stated. For example, economically viable. This means they produce products saleable and profitable. And ecological sensible apply agro-silviculture and forestry system. Other 3 pillars are professionally managed. For example, using simple financial measurement. For example, debit and credit technically applicable, appropriate technology, for example, mobile science and agroforestry, and culturally adaptable can be adopted the sustainable customary forest because they divided forbidden production and hunting forests very clearly. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, social forestry is a management right to the forest state. And TORA is property right, estate land. Both programs should be implemented consistently and never-ending process. These 5 actions should be conducted consistently for convincing that the government is very serious to implement the board program. 3 important things for the improvement of forestry community and strengthening of institutional system by training and so on, and good production system, and also smooth marketing system. The problem almost the marketing system for the social policy holder. And future policy representation and sectoral management is how to make proactive community through continuous companion. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I'll give you the to moderator. Thank you very much.
In general, I think Professor Subarudi conclude that in order the 2 policies, social forestry and TORA, to be effective in improving the people's social welfare, there are some correction must be done, including from revising the target, carefully verifying the recipients, revising the map base, and also revising the right scheme to be implemented. And it must be, the policies must be implemented consistently in a never-ending fashion. So that's, I think, the key point Dr. Subarudi mentioned. And later on in the discussion, I think we will reveal many other things. Distinguished participants, please allow me to proceed to our 4th speaker in this session. She is Dr. Ami Dussel from the FAO. However, residing in Rome, it's still probably about 5 or 6, maybe 5 o'clock in the morning there. And because of her tight schedule, Dr. Ami Dussel will present his material through a recorded short video. A little background about Dr. Amidusel from the FAO Rome. She is a team leader of climate change and resilience at the FAO of the UN since a few months ago, 2021, since July 2021. She joined the FAO after working as a senior scientist in the climate change, energy, and low carbon development team at the C4 in Bogor. So she was here. Her research interests include forest-based climate change, mitigation, smallholder and community forest management, and jurisdictional approach to sustainability. She holds a bachelor in biology from Colorado College, a master's degree in conservation biology and sustainable development from the University of Wisconsin. She was my neighbor because I was in Michigan. She was in Wisconsin. And she got a PhD in tropical forestry from the University of Florida. Her research interest is forest-based climate change, mitigation, conservation, impact evaluation, smallholder, and community forest management. Dr. Amidusel is also a very prolific writer. I got 20 pages list of CV, mostly about her papers and books. So I don't think I need to read any of that. In short, she is a very productive researcher. So please, committee, can you please play the video of Dr. Amidusel for her presentation?
Good morning. My name is Amy Duchel, and I'm a Senior Forestry Officer and Team Leader of Climate Change and Resilience at the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, based in Rome, Italy. I'd like to send my sincere thanks to the organizers of INAFOR for the kind invitation to be with you today. The title of my talk is Evaluating the Impacts of Local REDD+ initiatives on Forests and People. And this is based on work that I was doing when I was with the Center for International Forestry Research based in Bogor, Indonesia, not long ago. It's part of C4's Global Comparative Study on REDD+, which has been going on since 2009 and continues. We all know that forests are a key part of the climate solution. And to stay below or close to 1.5 degrees Celsius warming above pre-industrial levels, we do need to protect forests, restore forests, and sustainably manage forests. Forests are a natural carbon capture and storage mechanism. And of course, they provide other important services, such as regulating hydrology and housing biodiversity. And there are grave implications for maintaining agricultural productivity if they are cut down. Forests are also critical for development, and the evidence of forest contributions to rural development continues to accumulate. For example, natural forests and wildlands provide on average 28% of total household income in communities in and around forests, nearly as much as agricultural crops, supplying food, fuel wood, and fiber for consumption and sale. And when forests are converted to other land uses, those households who lose access to their forest-based livelihoods do not necessarily benefit from those new sources of employment and income. REDD+, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, and promoting the conservation, sustainable forest management, and enhancement of carbon stocks really came to life in the international climate change negotiations in the COP in Bali in 2007. And REDD+ was seen as a potential quadruple win, with climate benefits linked to co-benefits for poverty reduction, better forest governance, and biodiversity conservation. And it was ultimately incorporated into Article 5 of the Paris Agreement. Following the inclusion of REDD+ in the 2007 UNFCCC Bali Action Plan, more than 50 countries have initiated national REDD+ programs, and most of these explicitly include reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation in their nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. Importantly, one of the novel aspects of REDD+ compared to previous conservation instruments was the idea of results-based finance. So actually that forest-rich countries like Indonesia would receive funds for protecting and restoring forests. So you see in orange the countries that actually signed performance-based finance agreements, some quite early, like Indonesia with the government of Norway. And then many others who are developing REDD+ strategies who have yet to sign such agreements that are really at the heart of what REDD+ was intended to deliver. There has also been REDD+ action at the subnational level, and this map shows work done by CIFOR with Earth Innovation Institute and the Governor's Climate and Forest Task Force, looking at the efforts of subnational states and provinces across the tropics that were developing REDD+ and low emissions development strategies in line with the national strategies in those countries. And importantly, the case of East Kalimantan in Indonesia, which has now moved to the results-based finance stage, or the carbon fund of the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility of the World Bank, serves as an interesting example of how such action can happen at the subnational level in line with national efforts. At the COP in Bali in 2007, there was a call for REDD+ demonstration activities, after which many local REDD+ projects popped up across the tropics. And these were primarily led by non-governmental organizations and private companies, and primarily geared towards voluntary carbon markets. As of December 2020, there were 377 active local REDD+ projects in 56 countries, including Indonesia. And this is based on information compiled by CIFOR through the International Database on REDD+ Projects and Programs, which you can find through the link at the bottom of the slide. Importantly, these initiatives serve as interesting testing grounds for forest conservation and development approaches, and can have some important conservation and livelihood benefits, as we'll see in later slides. But the question is how to nest these initiatives into higher level REDD+ strategies. To understand the impacts of REDD+ at these different levels, about 3 years ago, we conducted a review of the REDD+ literature. And of the 45 studies that entered into that review, what we found is that most of them were case reports. So as you see on the y-axis, that's the type of study, and the number of studies are the bars going across. And so case reports, focused on a local REDD+ project were indeed the most common. And as you go up that y-axis, relatively fewer studies that used a comparison or a control group to be able to attribute observed outcomes to given interventions. Something else that we noticed from that review is that there was less attention to forest and carbon outcomes than some of these non-carbon outcomes like tenure security, well-being, and participation outcomes as well. And so a lot of focus on the social aspects of REDD+ and less focus on the forest and carbon outcomes, which is pretty interesting given that the primary objective of REDD+ was really to protect forests. Much of that attention might be because of the importance of social safeguards in the earlier REDD+ discussions, and many researchers focusing their efforts on that piece of the puzzle. I should say that since 2018, there have been many more rigorous impact evaluations using control areas, including at the national level through the use of synthetic controls. So that impact evaluation REDD+ literature is growing, but still it is smaller than one would expect given the importance of REDD+ in international and national discourses. So in that review, among the few studies that actually used control areas to try to understand the impacts of REDD+ interventions were a series of studies that were part of CIFOR's Global Comparative Study on REDD+. And what we did was look at 22 local REDD+ initiatives in 6 countries, so Brazil, Peru, Cameroon, Tanzania, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and 150 villages across those sites and 4,000 households. And we combined socioeconomic surveys with global forest change data to understand the effects of REDD+ interventions on a set of common outcome indicators. So for example, we looked at forest cover and land use change, as well as local livelihoods, income, assets, tenure security, and perceived well-being. And working in both control and intervention areas allowed us to look at what kinds of outcomes could be attributed to different interventions. And we conducted the first round of surveys in 2010, the second round in 2014, and then we went back to a selection of 8 of the sites for a third round of data collection in 2018. So it's really one of the only studies with this kind of longitudinal data to understand long-term impacts of REDD+ interventions. Something that we realized early on is that REDD+ is really a bundle of interventions. So when we think of REDD+, we often think solely of payments for ecosystem services, given the importance of that results-based finance component of REDD+. But actually on the ground, the way it's being implemented is indeed as a bundle. And so the intervention types range from tenure clarification and land registries to environmental education with local communities, to forest enhancement activities such as enrichment planting, and then of course restrictions on forest access and conversion, which was some of the heavier handed command and control measures that are implemented in places like Brazil have gained a lot of attention for their effectiveness often in reducing deforestation, but then some of the negative well-being impacts that those kinds of interventions can have. And then the livelihood enhancement piece, the conditional livelihood enhancements or the non-conditional livelihood enhancements, the non-conditional livelihood enhancements are sort of the bread and butter of rural development interventions. And those were the most prevalent type of intervention at these REDD+ sites. So support for agroforestry systems, fish ponds, rubber plantations, really depending on the site, a diversity of different kinds of interventions, but no connection to, a required land use change by those communities. And the idea of conditional livelihood enhancement, so what was thought of as the heart of REDD+, was only comprised only less than 10% of the interventions being applied on the ground. So whether it was payments for avoiding deforestation or sustainable livelihood support that was conditional on land use change, that was relatively uncommon at most of these sites, which was quite surprising. This figure shows the results of the analysis of impacts of those 22 local REDD initiatives on local tree cover. And what you see here are sort of 4 different methods used to assess those outcomes. The top 2 quadrants are at the site level, and the bottom 2 are when you go down to the community level. And on the left are the before and after results. So basically before the the initiative started, and then after, comparing performance. And the right-hand column includes the control groups. So in general, independent of method used for this analysis, we did find some reduced tree cover loss at the REDD+ sites studied. And so that was a good news story. And interestingly, performance appears better in the analysis with controls and at the village level. So that does, tell us that, method of analysis does matter, and it's important to think about that when analyzing results of any study. In terms of impacts on local well-being, at those 22 sites, we found that well-being effects were small and mixed. So sometimes a bit negative, sometimes a bit positive, but more likely to be positive when incentive components were included. And importantly, across this global study, we did not observe systematic negative effects on local people. And I think that's important because there is sometimes a discourse of, REDD+ hurts local people. And in fact, what we found was that even in situations where there was restricted access to forests in the name of REDD+, when there were real incentives in place to promote sustainable livelihoods and support local communities, a lot of those restrictions were buffered, and the negative effects were buffered. So that, I think, underscores in a quantitative way the importance of getting incentives to the ground and to the local people who are managing forests. Also, land tenure was just highlighted as a persistent challenge. So despite the fact that REDD+ in many countries elevated issues of rights of local communities, of indigenous peoples to the national level, still there are issues with lack of tenure security inhibiting benefits getting to the ground and promoting equitable outcomes. So it is something that still needs work and attention. Another area for attention is gender, and some of the work at these sites showed that women were less informed about the REDD+ initiatives in their villages. They were participating less in the design and implementation of these initiatives. And so, our conclusion is that, okay, despite a lot of growing importance in the forest and climate change community about, looking towards gender equitable outcomes, more attention is still needed. So some of the takeaways from this long-term work. I think first, just remembering that REDD+ is a bundle of interventions. And, when we're talking about REDD+, we're not talking about one thing, and we're certainly not talking about one level of action either. And we did find from our work that, restrictions on forest clearing are key in terms of helping reduce deforestation, but there could be negative effects on local well-being if incentives are not included. There is still a need for more reliable evidence on the impacts of REDD+ initiatives to promote learning and inform future efforts. With all of the attention now on the UN Decade for Ecosystem Restoration, there are many lessons from the REDD+ experience that can be applied to restoration initiatives. And we would be remiss to not learn from this more than a decade of experimentation at multiple levels to inform those kinds of efforts. And then I think another message that we found really in the work more broadly was the need to build new constituencies for forests and align those with some of the rights-based global initiatives. We've seen at the IUCN Congress this week in Marseille, France, that indigenous peoples are really at the table for the first time, making clear demands about forest protection and protection of their forest-based livelihoods and rights. And so really there's a huge opportunity for those kinds of partnerships with indigenous peoples and local communities. So for more of the results from this long-term study, CIFOR's long-term study, we published a book, our last book in 2018, Transforming REDD+, Lessons in New Directions, and then a brief with WRI and CIFOR, a joint brief on forest-based climate mitigation, lessons from REDD+ implementation that goes deeper into some of the issues that I was just mentioning about learning from this experience to inform other forestry initiatives in the climate space. So, and I should say that the Global Comparative Study on REDD continues. It's being negotiated a fourth phase of funding, and Indonesia is one of the priority countries for that fourth phase. So I know that colleagues at CIFOR are continuing, looking forward to collaborating with national partners on that work. So thank you so much for your time, and you can find out more about CIFOR's Global Comparative Study on REDD+ at the website, and here are the main donors for the long-term work. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, committee, for playing the pre-recorded video. And of course, appreciation to Dr. Ami Dussel for allocating her time and energy for preparing the very useful video. And unfortunately for this part, although it is very interesting, it is about the impact of REDD+ on the community. It's very interesting issue. A lot to be discussed about that, but unfortunately we cannot have a discussion on it because it is like a one-way presentation. So it is recorded, and I think we can get the material from the committee and rerun it again if needed later on in your own facility. In short, the impact I got from the presentation, the impact of REDD+ is no negative impact was founded so far to the community well-being, but the positive impact is very small and varying from places to place. And the land tenure is still a challenge, and also the improvement of the gender attention. That was the fourth presentation today, and finally we came to the last presenter, but not least, of course. He is Dr. Adam Tyson from the University of Leeds. Dr. Tyson will share his research on the subject of rearrangement of socio-political relations between state and village forest communities for enhancing forest governance. He is currently an associate professor on Southeast Asia politics at the let me read this, at the Leeds University, UK. He joined the School of Politics and International Studies in 2011 after working for universities in Canada, Indonesia, and Malaysia. So, drawing from his international experience, he is currently involved in a number of interdisciplinary research projects with colleagues in the UK, as well as in Asia Pacific. And he is responsible for the Polish internationalization agenda that builds research and education links with partners overseas. Since 2004, he has studied processes on political transition in Indonesia. His research focuses on the unintended consequences that have arisen in Indonesia since the transition to democracy in 1998. He is interested in the ways in which liberal reform produced illiberal outcomes in newly decentralized Indonesia based on comparative evidence of ethnic and religious revivalism. In addition, his research considers why democracy complicates effort to achieve environmental sustainability and development that's in Indonesia and also in Malaysia. Participant, one of the notable forestry policies recently implemented in Indonesia is the promotion of village forests. This is in line with the idea of increasing people access to forest resource and hence improving the living of the people. So Dr. Adam Tyson will present his research finding on this issue, and his accumulation of research finding, I believe, will be very useful for us all. And let's give the platform to Dr. Tyson for presenting his material. Please, Dr. Adam Tyson, 20 minutes is yours for presenting your material, please.
Thank you so much. It's very lovely to be with all of you today. It's nearly 5 in the morning now here in Leeds, UK, but I've hung in there till the end. But it's really delightful to be invited today. So I'll give you a fairly short presentation, and I have also kind of rationalized the rather long-winded title that was advertised. So just have a brief conversation with the panel and with the participants in relation to local forest governance with case studies from Indonesia. All right, so the idea that we'd like to cover today focuses primarily on the notion of governance. So let's just quickly run through what we mean. We can define governance here today as generally a framework for managing complex situations, striving for direction and control, and improving decision-making processes to reach preferred outcomes. Now, this is where we get into the sort of contested ideas about what are the preferred outcomes in local forest governance, when, as most of the speakers have alluded to, we have fundamental tensions between, striving for livelihood outcomes, improvement schemes, while also attempting to achieve a level of sustainable resource use, sustainable forest management, and best practices when it comes to land use. So these are the challenges. Now, of course, we can always think of forest governance in abstract or conceptual terms, typically encountering ideas around human behavior, driven or shaped by opportunity structures and institutions, or then, by contrast, or sometimes in complement to this, is agency in the form of our objective interests or subjective interests, our rational or irrational calculations, various types of social norms, and of course, as always, power struggles and contestations around knowledge and interpretation of meaning and of our world. So the question today, one of the questions today is around legitimate local forest governance. Now here the term I've added is legitimate, because if we're talking about developing a framework, there has to be that element to it. And if this form of governance is undertaken with propriety, we have to then accept the demand that there has to be levels of input from all constituents, all stakeholders, all interested parties. And that leads us down the sort of participatory governance model. But as we've learned, and as is very clear, I think, empirically and conceptually, an ideal form of participatory governance is always disorderly and quite messy. So we're encountering, the slight tension between an ideal framework of governance and in reality, ones in which we encourage participation, but then in a sense create disorder. The alternative is the imposition of policy, the imposition of directives without much participation, which is equally problematic because it doesn't guarantee the best long-term outcomes are achieved. But what we have here with good governance or participatory governance, which involves local constituents, is that we encounter the paradox that has been alluded to already in most of the talks today, which is the need to create wealth and betterment through resource exploitation, plantations, while conserving forests and habitat. And I suppose the big challenge here, and in a sense, officials from the ministry will have to resolve this, is what is the balance? How much exploitation is sufficient, and where to draw the line, and how to preserve the integrity of forests while again achieving livelihood outcomes. And I think to help navigate these questions, I think it's worth reflecting on some of these paragons of contemporary good governance, and again, as they apply to our particular context in Indonesia. So this is a topic that's already been covered by several speakers, but the principle of zero burning. This has been a big campaign throughout heavily forested areas. It's been a big campaign in ASEAN and particularly in Indonesia. You encounter the push for zero burning locally. I've surveyed the landscapes to some extent around Riau province, where this image is from. And clearly the messaging is there. A good governance outcome is zero burning. But then, of course, we encounter complexity, contestation, and ambiguity when we touch down on the ground. One of the allegations or one of the concerns locally is the application of new police powers when it comes to enforcing zero burning, and the fact that as much as it may be well-intentioned, these types of public order measures can be used to target particular people. And, again, when these policies touch the ground, they become quite contentious. I mean, no one would suggest that zero burning is a bad principle, but what becomes apparent on the ground is that, there are some important ambiguities around this. Another paragon of good governance is clearly consultation, and this is, what we referred to already in terms of participatory governance. Now, consultation, from these processes, and this alludes to the Gambut Kita talk earlier, is that you realize that, well, what are the local priorities, and to what extent do they resonate with national imperatives or even global norms around net zero emissions targets, around zero burning, around good forest management, around sustainability. Well, local consultation suggests that, yes, first and foremost, people are concerned with livelihoods and developmental outcomes and opportunities. And this sometimes means that you can't have it both ways. And what's interesting now about community engagement is having this conversation to perhaps propose during process of consultation to local people that actually their story is part of this bigger story. So while you tell a smallholder who may be in possession of or own or be responsible for 2 or 3 hectares of land, that actually the choices they make contribute to the bigger picture, which is the story of how we manage forests. It might help bring this realization home that some long-term planning and some foresight is useful, but that's not easy to tell people when, as is normal in most situations, people are facing hardship or challenges or have to make hard decisions, because when you commit to land conversion, you're committing to often several decades of expected harvests and outcomes, right? So there's a whole kind of decision-making matrix that is very interesting, and local consultation often reveals that national priorities don't always make sense or resonate on the ground. And again, this was a point raised previously that, let's say, peatland restoration is not on the radar. Well, that's not altogether surprising, and that's no fault of anybody, but it is certainly worth highlighting. Good governance, well, that does link into notions of supply chain transparency, because this is a trade. There are complex interactions between growers and harvesters, middlemen and makalar and brokers, and those who then eventually get fresh fruit bunches, if you take the case of palm oil, onto the lorries, over to the mills, and then start the whole process. Well, good governance, I think, is part of the story. And then that does also link into decision-making logics and rationales that drive these industries, and it links into good governance choices when it comes to land use change, and of course as well, zero burning, because actually burning is an integral part of a lot of agricultural practice. So we've got to reconcile these, not shy away from these questions, but address them directly. And this is where I think the participatory model is advantageous, because you have to have these hard conversations. If you gloss over them, they don't go away. So again, peatland restoration, sustainability, certification, these are part of the sort of global push where you have interesting interactions between multi-levels of governance. And what's important at local levels is having these conversations, that these are now the sort of established principles, and how do people respond? How do they make sense of these ideas, and to what extent, does certification mean anything to a smallholder when clearly the capacity to audit and understand how best practice actually reaches and touches down in remote places, we have limited capacity to do this. So we ought to be engaging at local levels to see whether these principles actually make sense, and whether they are considered legitimate. Okay. And then very, very importantly, of course, we have cadastral mapping, and there's been a long-running initiative to try to come up with one map, to once and for all demarcate and understand the exact extent of land ownership, land use, these patterns, and the extent of how far plantations cut into the landscape. It's a great initiative. Problematic, of course, because you encounter all sorts of complex relationships, and indeed, you probably have to create some kind of amnesty locally if and when these efforts reveal certain land use practices that shouldn't have been done the way they've been done. But again, this only works if you have buy-in from local communities, consent, and participation. So then, to start to sum up, we have a sort of commodity and agribusiness challenge, let's say, or in the case of palm oil. On the one hand, the promise of a better material life, which no one should ever underestimate, but of course that this comes at considerable risk to forests, with both external and implicit costs, leading to, of course, profound trade-offs, and to sort of hark back to one of the previous talks. Peatland restoration is not on a local radar despite national priorities, because there's an economic rationale that is predominant. And that's not a unique critique of Indonesia or anyone in particular. This is completely to be expected. But of course, as we know, and as the Indonesia-EU dispute around land use change reveals, this current scale of land use change does demand attention. And what we ought to use local governance mechanisms for are to kind of understand this process of how we reevaluate value propositions. So the value of our land or our forests is really important here. And we talk about this in terms of, well, what are the alternatives to monocropping, or let's say committing to or investing in palm oil production, which then binds you to a sort of 20-year timescale at the minimum. These decisions then echo into the future. So if we value land only by its extractive value, okay, that's one thing. If we value land, though, in the sense that there's high conservation value, well, how does that then translate into real outcomes? And often, as was alluded to, if you tell someone not to become a smallholder for palm oil, kelapa sawit, well, what is the alternative? And this is where we continuously run up against a wall. I think I need to move on a little bit more quickly, so I'll skip some of this. But you consider, for example, and I think local communities deserve this, you know, a high level of expectation in terms of what people are able to discuss, you know, treating local communities with the respect and dignity they deserve, insofar as you can put hard questions to people that don't have to sound patronizing. So we're not parachuting in to solve everyone's problems. Rather, we're having a process of dialogue to understand, you know, questions around, for example, certified sustainability. What does this mean? You know, and how do we provide the technical support to achieve these outcomes? High density feedstock, conversion of degraded land. We know all of this, but how to make it happen in practice? You know, obviously working with the Kepala Desa and everybody else locally. How do you achieve supply chain transparency that was mentioned? And legal innovations such as strict liability, which link into the zero burning, to minimize risks and costs in pursuit of good governance. And very briefly then, any local decision made should be understood in this broader scenario, which is that we have these 2045 production targets, let's say for crude palm oil, and the local story is integral to achieving this scenario, right? And if, for example, you want to reach these production targets by 2045, or let's say 60 million metric tons, you know, you have to engage local producers. And if you want to increase extractive efficiency and double it, you know, you have to understand how this can be achieved at local levels. And clearly this has to be done through consultative processes. The other scenario, of course, is that, well, you know, by some models, if you achieve these production targets by 2045, you're going to have to convert another X amount of million hectares. By one estimate, you know, nearly 15 million additional hectares will have to be converted, possibly a land area the size of the country of Syria. So to engage, you know, smallholders and local communities in these questions one at a time does fill a lot of gaps and holes, I think, in our knowledge, because on aggregate, we can clearly set these targets, but it's only by understanding the, you know, the various people involved in the everyday decision making that really kind of begin to illuminate how we achieve these targets while minimizing damage and then achieving livelihood outcomes. It's having conversations about legal innovation with local people to see whether they actually feel like these principles are, one, legitimate, and two, able to put into practice. And again, then you also can address head-on concerns people have about the misuse of new rules and the misuse of various powers that are decentralized. Now, we know that environmental protection will be affected or is being affected by the new omnibus bill. And this is a question worth having locally as well. Should we revise notions of strict liability? Is AMDAL, past its shelf life? Should we maintain a minimum forest cover for river basins or indeed any kind of local ecosystems? Well, how do we know this? What are the limits of forest cover? What is sustainable What do people need to have a life balance? Food security, in addition to crops for sale or crops for exploitation. And then this is, again, part of a bigger question for Indonesia. What level of forest cover ought to be maintained, and what will this look like in 2045? And then finally, I would just say, well, we can perhaps fall back on some much older doctrines like public trust, where of course you have sovereign obligations to ensure access to and production of resources, but this is for future generations. Again, it's easy to have high-level conversations of this nature. But what's important, I suppose, is bringing this level of conversation down into the villages and getting real responses to these notions. Of course, we can say, well, forests are a public good. They can be exploited, they can be owned. We can take an extractive value here. But to really push for innovative local governance, we need constant public and media scrutiny, honest reappraisal, and participatory mechanisms where I think we are as open and frank as possible. And also, we don't fall into the sort of tyranny of low expectations. We put these high-level questions directly to local constituents for a very honest reappraisal. And I think I shall leave it there. I haven't really been watching the clock, but hopefully that remains within the within the time constraints. Okay, so I believe that's it for now. I'm going to try to stop this share screen. Yeah, I think that's done it. Okay, so thank you very much, and I look forward to the final conversation with participants and the question and answer session. So thank you all.
You're doing well with the time, not more than 15 minutes, I believe. Very well done. Participants, I think you took note carefully that basically Dr. Adam Tyson is sharing with us that what is good governance in a paradoxical situation in forestry we are having, and in a democratic country like us, Indonesia, in which paradox like happen. Yeah, many paradoxes happen, like in one side we need to get more involvement of the people, but on the other side it creates a lot of mess in the implementation. And yeah, basically he told us that what should be done, what lay ahead, what it needed to implement good governance in a country like us, and in short, that how to achieve a good government with minimized costs. That what to say. That's a big question, because like he mentioned near to the end of his presentation, that high-level conservation is easy, but putting the conversation down to the village is no easy at all. All right. I think we have almost an hour left for the discussions. I don't need to spend more time to resume, because I don't believe I can resume it. All the very condensed presentations. Basically, Dr. Mendam has shared on how a research in Kalimantan revealed that a lot of things still need to be done in order to be successfully restoring our peat forests, especially when it relates to the living of the people. Dr. Tetra share about what ITTO has been doing in order to improve, in order to increase sustainable forest management in the world, in the tropic especially, including on the certification issue and others. Professor Subarudi shared with us about two very important policies implemented in Indonesia, the social forestry and land reform, and what need to be revised in order to be those policies work in the field. And Dr. Rami Dussel shared about the impact of REDD+ on the communities. And finally, Dr. Adam Tyson shared about how forest governance should be done and must be done in the context of our country. So now we proceed to the Q&A sessions. We have 45 minutes. And Gali is helping me with a list of questions. Yeah. I think I just, do you remember how many questions is there totally, Gali? Maybe 100? No. Well, Gali put it in order according to the speakers. Let me read the question to Dr. Mendam first. You don't put who raised this question? No. Okay. It's all of the questions are anonymous. First question is, I do agree with your statement that community need sustainable livelihood to support peatland restoration. When land base is quite difficult to be developed, since peatland species usually are perennials and took long term to be harvested compared with oil palm, maybe we should look at other options such as fish farming or beekeeping. What is your opinion about that? And the second question to Dr. Mendam. Very interesting presentation from Dr. Mendam. Yeah, the question I want to ask is, there are many challenges to implementing sustainable peat cultivation. What strategic steps should be taken to encourage communities to implement sustainable peat cultivation? All right, those are two questions to Dr. Mendam. Please kindly give your answer before I move to the next question to the next speaker.
Thank you, Pak Putera. Yeah, so to the first question, I think it's actually going to be very important to look at other livelihood sources such as fish farming and beekeeping. I think that they are very much in line with what the communities would like. You know, I think what I've noticed is that a lot of the communities that's say they're used to fishing and used to farming, sorry, they're used to fishing and maybe beekeeping, but not so used to farming. So going and looking at agriculture is a bit of a step change for them, especially agriculture in re-wet situations. So yes, we should definitely be looking at those options, and any other, like swallow's nest is another option. That's definitely something that we should be exploring for communities. But there's also the challenge about what to do with the land. The land is sitting there and it's going to be utilized for something or someone. So I think we do need to keep in mind what we can do with it and what we should be doing with it. Maybe options like REDD are a good option for us, but we need to explore that more and find out how much income we can earn, how much, what value that has for the communities. So I think that's the first question. Coming to the second question. So what strategic steps should be taken to encourage communities? I think for me, it's about that shared vision and making sure that everyone has the same idea about peatland restoration. And look, maybe once we share our visions, maybe peatland restoration won't be so important. Maybe we'll be focusing on actually generating livelihoods for people and making sure that they can have a good income. And if we can restore peatlands at the same time, then that's a good outcome. But let's focus on the people here and make sure that the people benefit from our work. And once that happens, then the environmental restoration will happen naturally too. We want that to be a side product, a side benefit from our, helping the people to manage their own environment, rather than forcing environmental change where people miss out or lose or suffer.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mendam, for your answers. Yeah, it's very interesting that, in fact, finding a new option of livelihood is key in order to be peat restoration to be successful. And I remember from the presentation that the key is to find a new livelihood that take care of the opportunity cost suffered by the people. So meaning we need to find an option that can create money not less than palm oil does. So it's a very intriguing question. Thank you again for your answer. Maybe later on some will raise another question. Now I would like to move to a question raised to Dr. Tetra Yanuaryadi. There are 3 questions. First is, what does ITTO do to manage multi-stakeholders' interests in improving forest governance? And the second is, what is your point of view to rationalize the policy of UU Cipta Kerja, the Omnibus Law, the one mentioned by Dr. Adam Tyson also, considering forest management that already having tightened sustainability criteria and indicators? And what is the connection between both? And the third question, last question, there are so many economic transactions from forest area conducted by communities in various commodities such as coffee, cacao, palm oil, and others. Unfortunately, some of them are under illegal cultivation, whereas the economic transactions have a high contribution to the national macroeconomics. Due to illegal activities, unfortunately, those transactions do not recognized by national statistic data. How possible this economic transaction recognized by and be part of official statistical data in the future? Thank you. Yeah, please, Dr. Tetra, provide your answer.
Pak Putra, thank you so much. Yeah, I got 3 questions, and some of them it's not easy to answer,
The third one,
especially when I'm not well versed on the issue. But however, let me try to give my overview or opinion about the question raised to me. So number 1 is, what does ITTO do to manage multi-stakeholder interests in improving forest governance? Probably many of you knows about ITTO, how ITTO works. We are focusing on intervention on the ground through different project implementation. So in the developing that project implementation, we have procedure and written in ITTO manual how that projects formulation be formulated through very intensive multi-stakeholder discussion. So the proponent of the proposal that's coming from the member country will go and see the stakeholders, and especially to the community down there, and also the local government, and as well as the national government. And the intensive stakeholder communication discussion will come up with a kind of construction of the project. So from that interview discussion result with the stakeholder, we will know actually what kind of interest from the community, from the stakeholders. And so basically our projects implemented on the ground is really to answer the demand raised by the stakeholders. This is the practice way how to deal with the multi-stakeholder interest. And along the course of project implementation, discussion, communication, sharing information to the stakeholders are always embedded in the activity. So from time to time, actually, the project can go back and review the targets, review its logical frameworks, how can the target or objective can be attained through adjusting the dynamic the project encounter with. That is the answer to question number 1. And for the question number 2, what is your point of view to rationalize the policy of Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, considering forest management that already having tightened sustainability criteria and indicators? And what is the connection between both? Yes, this is the one that I said that I am not really into the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja, but I know the that is the undang-undang or law that is created to respond to what is the current situation facing by the nation, by Indonesian people. But of course, there's nothing perfect. Even it has been enacted, and it should be from time to time be evaluated how the undang-undang can really work on the ground. And I think Professor Adam starts upon that issue, how to deal to some extent to the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja. And of course, we already have some experiences and work on or trying to achieve the sustainable forest management. And we do have criteria indicator, which is very scientific based and practical based approach. So that I believe this is part of tool that can be used to review the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja in their implementation. So that is the connection actually. We have really scientific and practical tools to evaluate the Undang-Undang Cipta Kerja. So I do believe there's no contradiction in between the two, but the important thing is that how can these two things can go along to improve, to improve the practice, to achieve the best practice, legally best practice. So I think I try to answer the question number 2, but I'm sorry if I'm not really answering perfectly. And then the question number 3, I capture actually the slides shown before on the question. There are so many economic transactions, from forest area conducted by communities in various commodities such as coffee, cocoa, palm, or etc. Unfortunately, some of them are under illegal cultivation, whereas the economic transaction have a high contribution to the economic, national macroeconomy. Unfortunately, those transactions do not recognized by national statistic data. How possible this economic transaction recognized by and be part of the official statistic data in the future? Thank you. Pak Putra, maybe you can help me how to answer this. This is issue that has been discussed since long ago, pros and cons and reality. So it's mixed together in one bowl, and then we have to step on it. We have to use this bowl to convince people that our forest management is in place. It's not easy, of course. So yeah, this is actually, we have to come back to what we are as the forester, the professional forester, that we have to do the professional work in accordance with the principle of sustainable forest management. This is the way how we actually put on track the wrong things, put on the track the wrong things. So I think the short answer to this question is that we have to have very good people, very honest people, and very professional people for making the decision in the forestry sector. Yeah, thank you, Pak.
Thank you, Pak Tetra. Yeah, I don't know if with regard to question number 3, I think the key is no country will put illegal transaction in their official statistical data. So no country. Yeah. So I mean, what we need to do here is to limit those illegality, to make all transactions illegal or production illegal, so it will be in the statistics. So as long as they are still illegal, so there is no way to put in any official statistics. Yeah, thank you also for answer on question number 2. You said you may not give a very good answer, but to me, this is a question with no definitive answer, right? Because you can argue for days on confronting the new omnibus law versus the tightened criteria and indicators of sustainable forest management. Because if we will try to find how the contradiction among them, yeah, of course we will find it, but the key is the omnibus law is created not to create further problems. So thank you very much, Pak Tetra. Now we move to the next. Sorry, it's not touch screen. So, okay. The question to Professor Subarudi. There are 4 questions, but I think some of the answers you already presented earlier. Social forestry is one of the priority policies of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry to provide access to the community to manage the forest. How to control the program so the community who live around the forest that will get the benefit of the program. Yeah, you talk about the verifying the candidate recipient earlier, but please give answer on this. And also the question is, how is is the TORA policy running well until now? And the third question, there are data around tenurial conflict which have been mapped nationally by KPA. That is namely LPRA. Yeah, I heard about that. That was many times had been exposed in many years ago. Why such data never used by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry in the TORA scheme? It can accelerate the target of TORA. It will approach to the vision of genuine agrarian reform in forest area. So that's a very critical question. I think it's about people right on land. And the fourth question is, some scholars state that traditional or customary laws need to be limited due to there is still lack of good administration within customary communities in many areas in Indonesia. What do you think about it? Please, Professor Subarudi, 4 questions for you.
Thank you, Pak Putra. How to control the implementation of the social policy program depends on, we have to validate it about the reception target. Sometimes the location of the social policy license is far away from the location of hosting of the local community. But the distance is no problem if the accessibility is all right. The other one is we check if the blue or silver of the social policy holder is still low than 10%, it means the benefit has not distributed well to the social policy holder. This way, from this situation, there are for the blue color is only 11%. So it means the benefit is still not achievable for the prosperity. The second question about how is Torah implementation? The Torah implementation, we can see that there are so many problems rejecting from the AGU and many pressure faced by the task force and dominant power from the giant company to interfere the Torah, and also strong influence for government institution for land management, and also marginalization of customary forest. Until now, the customary forest has not legal aspect for the law. That's why the president using the hearing of the Badu is meant, please speak up the law for customary law. And third about how is
why the data?
The Torah. We can see that for the Torah implementation. 300 actually for land certification is already achievable, but for the land distribution is still low regarding the forest release distribution. Why? Because of the many regulations. If we want to forest release, there are some regulations to be fulfilled. And the KPI question about, it has already give the data about for the Torah, for Torah acceleration. But the problem is, I don't know, is this your data is located in the ex-HGU or in the forest release? I'm thinking that in the forest release is still many handicap. This should be solved by to speed up the Torah. And the last question regarding what do you think about the scholar talk about the customary has not good administration? I think the problem is government should allocate it wherever the customary forest, the customary community, give them, because our constitutional justice has already stated that if there is a forest belong to the customary, we can give it them. But the problem is they can change. For example, if they receive the forest protection, they can treat the forest protection as the forest production. if they want to change the forest production, they have to make proposal to the Ministry of Forestry to change the function of the forest. So the administration, the important thing, not the administration, but how the customary community has the process of decision making. For example, some of the customary forests has the decision making only made by elite of the customary. So it is we have to avoid the decision making by only the elite. Otherwise, the other cannot be satisfied by the decision. That's why. Thank you, Pak Putra.
Thank you, Professor Subarudi, for your answers on the those 4 questions. Yeah, I hope it satisfied the one who raised the questions. Finally, there's no question to Amy, of course, Dr. Amy Dussel, but there are 2 questions for you, Dr. Adam Tyson. You said that you have found participatory governance is often disorderly, messy. What is your opinion of the recent law, omnibus law, in terms of developing or providing the good governance, especially in environment and forestry sector? Second one, inevitably, one map policy also requires a political approach. Have you ever seen the effectiveness of bringing the policy through a political party? Can this be realized in accordance with the initial goal set? Or maybe there are other ways to implement the one map policy that other countries have implemented effectively? Yeah, please, Dr. Adam Tyson.
Okay, thank you. Right, so omnibus bill, I mean, this is pretty much business and investment and, you know, streamlining of administration idea, make things more efficient, make them run better, and it really is all encompassing. I think there's 82 different pieces of legislation being revised. You know, it's massive, but again, does that affect things on the ground? I mean, I'm not sure it's obvious how this will translate into any tangible changes, you know, in terms of participatory governance. Now, well, you could say, do those sorts of underlying principles, you know, do they make sense locally? And yes, you know, you want to streamline all levels of administration, so you can do this locally as well. The problem is that, again, you know, people have criticized the approach to the omnibus bill and called it a silent bill, not much consultation, which doesn't bode well and really doesn't necessarily satisfy the criteria for good governance. And indeed, yes, it doesn't rest well with this notion that any multi-stakeholder process is going to be very messy. But what one hopes is that the outcome is then vastly improved, because those who ultimately make decisions have to listen to contrary points of view. And then again, if we operate in sort of splendid isolation and just make decisions that we believe are right, there's a big risk to this. If we open up to a forum and listen to and get input, we often then can fine tune our decision making and fine tune our policies. So hopefully, you know, regardless of the omnibus bill, we can advance an approach that invites very frank and open discussion and that ultimately improves outcomes. It does, though, remind me of the sort of nature of a lot of the questions to other speakers. And it's something where we're sort of kind of dancing around, but not quite addressing front front and center, which is, what is the real vision for the future? Because ultimately we have a lot of questions around forest dependency on the, the limitations of what each sort of carefully demarcated subnational unit has at its disposal in order to serve its constituents. Now, if you decide that, well, we have a future with the forest, or a future in the forest, or a future without it, or beyond it, whatever it may be, what's really important is saying, well, what is the outcome of the decision to continue to, say, for example, replant or convert more land? And you can say, well, it satisfies that immediate need, which is for livelihoods, but how ultimately will the decisions made that are irreversible in terms of land use change going to then be fed back into, let's say, village development through longer term planning, through some kind of reinvestment, through some kind of sovereign wealth fund notion, so what is the vision really for having future generations imagine a life or a future, again, with or without or beyond or in harmony with the forests? And this is the big question. So we have the immediate pressures, but we need that longer term vision. And this is where good governance is going to play a key role. And the second question, which I can't see anymore. It's not on the screen.
Well, basically, what's your opinion? Can a policy like the one map policy maybe better implemented?
Yes, so it was about Satu Peta, which is a great one. I mean, here's where you have this, process led in a sense through consultation and through advisory and through experts. The WRI is heavily involved in this. So, well, again, I think the aspiration is noble, but the more you reveal, the more infinitely complex things tend to appear. I think what you encounter, and there's been problems with the policy. So apparently you have to sort of subcontract such a big project, and then you give specifications to each local unit to say, well, feed your data back into the one map. But there's been different grid scales, different resolutions, different overlays, and it's been very, very complex. But of course, as soon as you shine a light on some of the land use problems, you realize there's widespread malpractice. Then it raises the ultimately political question of, fine, do you accept that the history of that malpractice and its kind of path-dependent outcomes, and say, well, fine, there's an amnesty now, let's start over and let's do this right? Or do you take punitive measures? There's not really much you can do in terms of punishment. So I think the important lesson is how to proceed with a kind of amnesty. Yes, it's highly politicized. I'm not sure if there's necessarily a political party angle, because this is a national, this is a national level decision to go for transparency. And a lot of this is about digital tools. But yes, I would be interested to see, political party positions on this question, not necessarily whether the one map is supported or not, but whether the underlying principles are endorsed, and how different parties advocate dealing with the exposure of, let's say, illegal practices, or the breaches of certification, from timber to agriculture to everything. So yeah, it's a great project. It's taken a very long time. This is not new. The Satu Peta has been around for a long time. And yeah, I'm hoping we can see it with full disclosure and full transparency soon. Yeah, so thank you for the questions.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adam Tyson, for your additional explanations. Yeah, of course, when we talk about politics, about regulations, it always can carry us
through a longer and longer discussion, because it's very interesting and there are many opinions, there are many perceptions. But at least your explanation shed light on us about forest governance and in relation to our new omnibus law. And also your opinion on how to improve the effectiveness of our one map policy. Thank you very much. We still have about 5 minutes time, but there is one more question to you, Dr. Mendam. I hope you're still online. The question is, this is quite interesting. It's referred to your statement that your material that you said the ban on burning has reduced fires, okay? But it is not sustainable. It just creates social inequality. On the other side, peatland restoration, you said, is not on the community, rather as a priority. So it sounds like the effort to restore peatland is stuck by the local community. So like putting the blame on the local community. So why is it gone? Sorry. What is the good solution to make the project of peatland restoration can run well? What's your offer to make this contradiction solved? So okay, very good question, Dr. Nandam. Please, your answer.
Yes, thanks, Pak Butera, and very good question. I'm not sure I have all the answers, but it's clear that I'm not blaming the communities at all. I think the communities are.
That was my word.
Yeah, I think that they, that they're in this position, and very invidious position of trying to earn their livelihoods, make their living on the land that they own, but having these impositions placed upon them for environmental restoration, and they happen to be on peatland, which is super important to restore, but it's become very challenging for them to do that, because peatland itself is difficult to start with, and then add in the environmental restoration demands, it becomes almost impossible. The only solution that I can think of that is going to lead us out of this situation is to actually help the communities to own the problem, to own the solution. So to really bring them on board with why we need restoration, what we all as a community can do, from the government down to the community level, what the solutions are, and help the community themselves to make it happen. And at the moment I can see there's a lot of top-down imposition, but it's not getting to the community level, whereas we need to make it so that they want to do it for their benefit, so that the communities themselves can see that they are going to benefit from restoration of peatlands, as well as the broader population. So that's I think it's got to be driven by the community, is my answer.
Thank you. Sorry. Okay. Wait.
Thank you, Dr. Mendam. So I myself agree with your answer on the question about how to solve this. I think the discernible solution is how to put the community to own the problem and to own the solution. So to put them as the subject of the situation. I think that's a very sensible answer, and yeah, it's not to blame the community for the situation, but it's our common situation we face together. All right, exactly 5 minutes to 12, the time limit of our discussions. Of course, it is impossible to talk in very in-depth about very interesting issues in 2 hours virtually. So of course, I believe there are many other questions or requests for clarification from the participants. We have about 180 participants, but we cannot accommodate them all. But at least our discussion in this webinar will ignite further thoughts in every one of us, and we will keep working, keep doing our effort in order to come up with better social welfare of the people through research. So I think we have to end our sessions. I just want to express my highest appreciation to all the speakers. It's still very early in London. Thank you very much, Dr. Adam Tyson, for your time, and we apologize for waking you up very early. And also thank you to Amy Dussel, Dr. Amy Dussel, for providing us with the recorded video. And thank you to Dr. Mendam in Australia. There, it's noon time there. And of course, thank you to Dr. Tetra, who is by chance, he is in Indonesia right now, not in Yokohama. And thank you to Professor Subarudi. Also, thank you very much to all participants for your active participation. And thank you for the committee for convening this seminar. And I myself express my appreciation for I'm very grateful, I should say, being asked to moderate this very good sessions. And I myself, I'm very happy witnessing directly myself this the INAFOR is getting better and better from time to time. And I believe all those young researchers in this institution will keep making it better in the future. So I thank you very much. My apologies for not moderating very well. And I hope everyone is safe. Always take care and stay healthy in all the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, keynote speakers, and all participants. Ladies and gentlemen, we appreciate all participants that participated in the discussion. As a form of reward, we will give a special gift for selected participants who have asked critical questions during the discussion. Those participants are Mrs. Triwira from Banjarbaru Environment and Forestry Research and Development Institute, Dr. Sulistya Ekawati from the Center for Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instruments, Mr. Farid Al-Muhayyad from the Agency for Standardization of Environment and Forestry Instruments, Mr. Ismatul Hakim from the Center for Agrarian Studies, Bogor Agricultural University, Dr. Yanto Rohmayanto from the Center for Standardization of Disaster and Climate Change Instruments. And the last one, but not least, Mr. Rifki Tirta from the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. Congratulations to all of you. Please give an applause. The committee will contact the selected participants. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I will announce about the parallel session that will be held at 1 p.m. Presentations and discussions in the parallel session will be divided into 6 rooms. Room number 1, Community Empowerment. The room will be moderated by Ms. Aneka Prawesti Suka. Room number 2 will be moderated by Mr. Nugraha Firdaus. Room number 3, it will be moderated by Mr. Bugi Sumirat. Room number 4, it will be moderated by Mr. Dana Aprianto. Room number 5, Forest Economic, it will be moderated by Mr. Doni Wicaksono. Room number 6, Forest Economic, will be moderated by Ms. Nurul Silva Lestari. Distinguished participants are expected to choose a room. Presenters and participants can enter the selected room by press the breakout room button in the Zoom menu below, and then press join in the intended room. After the parallel session is over, all participants and presenters are expected to return to the main room by press the leave room button on the Zoom menu below. Please note that press the leave room button to get back to the main room. Do not press the leave meeting button, please. We will join the closing session at 3:30. Distinguished guests, keynote speakers, chairman, all presenters and participants. Ladies and gentlemen, we have had productive and inspiring time together, and this plenary session about to come to the end. I hope you found the presentation on this conference are informative and helpful. Let us all be guided by all the things we have learned and heard throughout the conference, and be able to see the influence for our future. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, now we will have a break. We expect you to come back by 1 p.m. to start the parallel session in the selected room as we mentioned before. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy our documentary movies entitled Lantern from Gajebo, a piece of traditional wisdom of the Baduy, as the runner-up in the video competition of INAFOR 2021. And the other movie is I Am Tropical Pete. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Keep safe and stay healthy, and have a good afternoon. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Masyarakat Baduy memaknai alam, bumi, dan hutan sebagai sumber penghidupan.
Mereka hidup selaras dengan alam berdasarkan hukum-hukum adat yang mereka miliki, aturan-aturan dari leluhur yang mereka taati.
Secara adat, masyarakat Baduy mempunyai waktu dan bulan tertentu untuk menanam sampai memanen hasilnya.
Kadu, petai, bang.
Musim ini mah satu mah berapa luas, Pak? Biasanya berapa luas?
Hektar, setengah hektar.
Setengah hektar.
Kita sekali panen gitu bisa berapa yuk dapat nak?
Kayak nulu 100, 200.
100 naon?
Bengkut.
100 bengkut.
Namun
kira-kira
namun kilo mah.
Ya, kilo. Kalau udah jadi beras 10
kilo 10 gitu.
Di Baduy kan gitu, di dalam hari pembagiannya ada caranya sendiri kan. Misalkan
itu satu tempat untuk kampung, satu tempat, jadi satu tempat untuk rumah ini ladang.
untuk lahan yang di situ banyak rumah ya.
Iya.
Nah itu dibagi-bagi sesuai dengan jumlah ini keluarga yang ada di kampung.
Loba bae.
Ama
Ama aku kang orang aya.
aya. Dia obatan atau dia
Paling kayak obat-obatan ibat ya daun-daunan gitu bae.
dedaunan.
Ya, di warung-warung
Dan ku ieu nya
lain.
di obat di luarnya.
Menang. Jeung biasa nama orang jeung tungkang mah si bijilna teh boga waktu.
Ayo waktu
Ulah dipaehan, soalnya waktu manehna eta.
Itu bagian dari daur itu.
Contohna kieu bae nya kupu-kupu.
Iya.
Henteu unggal bulan atau unggal poe kupu-kupu eta.
Datang.
Soalnya aya waktuna, kabeh ge boga waktu.
Biaskeun bae ya.
Biarkeun bae. Waktu manehna ieu. Berarti urang masalah ya, soalnya waktu manehna waktu ayeuna nya gitu.
Perubahan pola cuaca, dampak perubahan iklim juga dirasakan oleh masyarakat Baduy dalam mengelola hasil buminya untuk pemenuhan kehidupannya sehari-hari. Lama waktu kemarau dan penghujan juga terjadi di Baduy.
Ada perubahan nggak Pak dari dulu sampai sekarang? Misalkan hujannya
Tergantung cuaca, nah kadang-kadang bulan eta kan kurang hujan, seeutik gitu. Tapi kan di dia mah kan dingin gitu, henteu doang di luar, teu panas.
Kemarin banyak lebih hujan kemarin. Ayo peraan akhir ini hujan.
Ada kirang. Misalkan kemarau panjang ya Pak, misalkan ya kayak di Humana gitu dijieun misalkan saluran cai gitu teh nya.
Kami labrak bae.
Saluran air
Labrak bae kumaha alam bae lah.
Oh, kumaha alam.
Kumaha alam bae gitu.
Enggak ada perlakuan khusus ke humanya misalnya.
Kayak dikasihna ke Tuhan orang. Tenang bae.
Tenang wae.
Percaya di mah pangeran mah mere bulut sih. Sok mah nu ngurus di kumakeun kumaha maneh. Nya milikna ge sarua.
Secara adat terdapat hutan larangan yang tidak boleh dimasuki oleh sembarang orang, termasuk orang Baduy, tanpa seizin Puun, itu ketua adat Baduy.
Hutan lindung, hutan dungus-dungusan pantebenang digarap aya.
Oh aya, kayak hutan lindung.
Aya loba hutan lindung anu larangan-larangan lah.
Itu kalau hutan larangan ada pemiliknya atau punya kampung atau punya orang Baduy semua?
Hutan anu hektar mah buka semua, bukan negara suruh aja gitu. Tapi anak di Baduy dilindungi ku negara pemerintah gitu. Sebenarnya dirusak gitu lah. Nu lain ku dilainkeun, nu nyak-nyakkeun gitu. Ngadek sacerekna, nila saplasna, nu panjang ulah wani nektek, nu lonjor ulah nu pendek ulah wani nyambung. Aturan mah kitu.
Masyarakat Baduy percaya bahwa hutan yang terjaga dengan baik akan menyebabkan kondisi Baduy tetap kondusif. Pengelolaan alam dan hutan yang bijak oleh masyarakat Baduy memenuhi food security dan terjaganya hutan, menciptakan keseimbangan alam dan kebutuhan hidup dengan indahnya.
Aku gambut tropis. Di Indonesia, aku banyak dijumpai di Sumatera, Kalimantan, dan Papua. Aku berada di area genangan air seperti rawa, cekungan antara sungai, maupun daerah pesisir. Aku terbentuk dari timbunan sisa-sisa pohon, rerumputan, lumut, dan jasad hewan, dan butuh ribuan tahun hingga aku membentuk endapan yang tebal. Aku kuat sekali menyerap air, hingga 100 sampai 1300% berat keringku, atau hampir 13 kali bobotku. Karena kemampuan inilah aku jadi sehat, dan mampu mengabdikan diriku untuk kehidupan manusia, menyangga banyak pepohonan, menyediakan air, menjadi tempat tumbuh, serta berkembangnya ikan-ikan, dan masih banyak lagi manfaat yang bisa kuberikan. Namun tidak banyak manusia yang paham diriku. Mereka memperlakukanku seenaknya. Aku dibakar. Api panas menggerogoti diriku, hingga aku tak kuasa lagi untuk melawan. Aku hanya pasrah melihat asap tebal keluar dari tubuhku, melihat manusia tergopoh-gopoh dan bersusah payah memadamkan api yang dalam waktu singkat dapat memusnahkanku. Aku gambut tropis. Aku terbentuk karena proses alam. Aku ada karena kehendak yang kuasa. Jagalah aku, maka akan kujaga peradaban manusia dengan kehadiranku.